people want to say accounting is accounting and finance is finance, but nonprofit accounting and nonprofit finance and nonprofit bookkeeping has its own nuances to it
Yes,
that
yes.
you have to be able to watch
Yeah.
and be very mindful of.
Right.
So, what for you is one of the biggest observations that you have noticed when working with your nonprofit clients?
The setup is the most important piece. Your chart of accounts is the most important foundation. And that also goes into me thinking that, bookkeeping, accounting is like the most important aspect of an organization. Affects everything. Your donors look at your 990, they look at your audited financial statements, and that they decide from that if they're going to give you money. So yeah, so the setup is the most important piece, and I think that's the every nonprofit client, whoever happens to see this, should reevaluate their system and then decide whether, okay, do we need to change some things around to make more sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
That's spot on. I would say from my vantage point, looking at finance at a 10,000 foot strategic view perspective,
Mhm.
the nuts and bolts and mechanics and the setup are incredibly important. There are people who are operating for years and have been struggling with why they can't get answers to questions that they have. And we don't know if we have the right staff, do we have the right accounting system? I want to tell them to back it up and let's make sure you're set up so that you can answer the questions,
Right,
starting with what are we trying to do?
right, right,
So, and what are we really trying to do, and what do we need to monitor and measure so that we have the right tools and the right data in order to make the right business decisions. So you're absolutely right. That setup is incredibly important. Accounting to me is totally intuitive to accountants,
that counts.
but it's not intuitive at all to
Right.
anyone who has not touched it. And so people seem to feel that if I know how much money I have, then I'm somehow know accounting.
No,
And you've got to disconnect those two because
right,
accounting is not about just how much money I have.
right,
And I think that's what people look at accounting as being able to tell them.
right,
It can tell you that, but you have to be able to understand the context of accounting
I
and
know.
how accounting operates in order to get that very specific question answered.
Answer correctly. And in the beginning, it was hard for me to understand because it was a switch.
Right?
Now there's certain rules you have to read first before you can say I'm booking this income or recognizing it in that period, and then releasing the restrictions. That's another explanation that some nonprofits don't understand.
Right.
But I love it.
Obviously you do. I
I
mean, I've
love
worked with you. I've seen you go into explaining mode, and I've seen you go into battle mode where you really need to like make sure stuff is correct and on
right,
point. And
right, right,
that in and of itself is a skill and an art that should not should not go unnoticed because people who do the kind of work that you do and the kind of work that I've been involved in um, aren't always known for being the ones who can really take the time to explain things.
yeah,
But you're right, it's really important. It's a conversation that you have to have 12 times with
yeah,
everyone in the organization. The board needs to be able to understand it, that there are these rules that you're following, and you're very confined by those rules in terms of what you do in accounting world.
right, yeah.
And that's very different from how people are thinking about how they operate.
Right, how to operate. And for me, I think I always work with the idea of audit. So, and it's like everything I'm doing will affect your audit.
Mhm.
And if the auditor looks at the books and there's a material deficiency, and they will note it in their management report, and it's not a nice look for the organization at all.
Exactly.
I mean, in bookkeepers, because everyone has their style of bookkeeping, but I think there's a misunderstanding that a bookkeeper should just do accounts receivable and accounts payable. And I think nonprofits, if you're going to get a bookkeeper, have a bookkeeper that has the accounting background.
Absolutely.
They have, if it's not the experience, then they have the education or the degree in it. It's very important because the rules are changing all the time. They need to be able to apply what they're reading from FASB rules to bookkeeping.
Right.
It's really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, when you say the role of the bookkeeper and kind of the skill set and background of the bookkeeper, I think another area where nonprofits do themselves a disservice is anyone who's not on that side of the house. They think of bookkeeper, accountant, director of finance, CFO, controller, all the same person.
Right. No,
Right?
that'd be great.
All the same person. No. I mean, they could be if they were civil and had 38 personalities, but they don't. You don't want that. So, you know, you really have to educate
Right.
organizations that these are very separate skill sets. And you might find a combination of two or three of those skills within one person, but it's a strategic mistake for organizations to think that they're, you know, that office manager who just happens to sit in front of QuickBooks can also be the person who's going to know the accounting rules and be able to interpret information and all of that.
Yeah, right. And I understand their budgets might be
Absolutely.
the driving force behind it, and if that's the case, then definitely make sure your bookkeeper has accounting experience or knowledge, because then that's your 2-in-1 in that regard.
Exactly.
And then after that, as the budget grows, then you can, you know, break out or the other skill sets that you need for the roles. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.